Hello and welcome back to Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London. Today we'll be looking at what happened to the band in 2003. The Future Sound of London, a monstrous psychedelic bubble exploding in your mind, Volume 4, Resonance FM, 28th of January 2003.
I stopped taking drugs when I finally found the Lord, because the Lord is reality. The Lord is where it's at. Drugs just can't do it for you.
I just decided I was going to find a new way of life. And so I took off on my bicycle, met some brothers and sisters, and they were just walking around in the street, and I was really surprised at all the love they had, and all the joy and peace and everything they had in their lives. And so that night they brought me to a church and told me about Jesus Christ,
and how I could have a personal relationship with him, the Son of God.
If you want it, you can have it.
So begins a mix almost cluttered with religious spoken samples praising Christianity. Given Gaz's dislike of organised religion, it can only be taken as at least partially satirical. There are also numerous tracks from a Trunk Records compilation, Resurrection, the Amplified Bible of Heavenly Grooves, a collection of rare Christian psych rock music. Appearing only a month after the previous Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble Mix on XFM, and amusingly a day after the release of the Eurotechno soundtrack, this show kicked off a generally very quiet 2003 and brought the initial promotional period for the Isness to a close. It remains the band's only show on Resonance FM. Oh god, I hated this mix on first listen. My own dislike of Christianity did not gel with the various references to the religion, and even by the standards of past mixes, it's a headfuck. With more than 80 tracks packed into 90 minutes, barely anything gets a chance to breathe before it's hacked in half just in time for the next song snippet. Still, after the hard rock and funk groove oriented third volume, the number of tracks from musicals, odd novelty easy listening pieces, psych pop songs and difficult to classify oddities mixed in here, as well as a lot of spoken bits, makes it at least a little closer to the sound collage approach one might expect from a Cobain Dougans mix, and the style is very slightly more up my street. The spoken version of Divinity at 10 minutes is a beautiful addition. It would be lovely to have a proper release of that. Elsewhere, there's an eerily looped section of Give Peace a Chance, some ECM jazz from Ralph Towner and Jan Garbarek, a track listed as FSOL slowly falling backwards, it isn't, a number of Italian and German obscurities, a Bob Dylan parody, music from the 60s TV kids classic Le Clangers, chunks of Jesus Christ Superstar, and a lot of still unknown stuff. I spent a few hours tracking down as many of these as I could for the old Glaxial Pharmaceutical site and was pretty happy with the results. When Naboisha reapproached this mix for his fantastic Panda Reviews thread on the FSOL board, he went all out and found loads more in what I can only describe as a moment of inspired lunacy. A small number of tracks reappear from earlier mixes, James Last, the Mahavishnu Orchestra, Miles Davis, and barely anything comes from later than 1979. The mix is an absolutely incredible work and must have taken such a long time to put together. It requires patience and a very specific mindset to get through these utterly maddening 90 minutes, the sound of a psychedelia fan with ADHD, but when in that particular mood it's a wonderfully bonkers mix that reveals more with every listen. It would be well over a year until the next radio mix, by which time the FSOL name would be finally replaced with Amorphous Androgynous. The FSOL name as a standalone would not reappear for another 3.5 years. The mix was released as part of the launch of the Podroom in November 2008 and removed a while after. It is yet to appear on the Monstrous Psychedelic Bubble Mixcloud page. I made my last ever bootleg cover for a CDR version that I made. After this I just stuck to listening to them on my computer. Given the state of the back cover, it's probably a good thing I gave up on them at this point, to be honest. Although I did make the spine try and fit in with the Isness and the Mellow Hippo Disco show. Stakker, Eurotechno. Release date 27th of January 2003. For the first time ever, the original soundtrack of a visionary landmark in dance music culture, acid techno magic. So reads the sticker on the front cover of Eurotechno, the soundtrack to the legendary 1989 video. Released as part of a 2-album deal with Reflex along with Humanoid sessions, Brian's music was given a new lease of life here, and for many fans was a refreshingly electronic release in the midst of all the Amorphous Androgynous albums and radio shows. I discussed all the details of the music and the release when discussing the video itself in the second chapter of this series. Humanoid Sessions 84 to 88. Release date 10th of February 2003. When FutureSoundOfLondon.com launched in 2001, the store contained two intriguing 2-CD releases, the Stakker Sessions by Humanoid and Z-Box by Z-Box. The former described as a collection of tracks recorded in Manchester between 1988 and 1989. These represent a study of early acid tracks and industrial electronics and form the path to the single Stakker Humanoid. The tracklist for the Stakker Sessions is on screen now. It wouldn't be until early 2003 that some of this material was finally released, on Richard D. James and Grant Wilson Claridge's Reflex label. This is Brian's take on the story. He, Richard D. James, phoned me and said he wanted to talk about Stakker, how much of an influence on him and Grant it had been, and could he put it out on Reflex. Of course, yes was the reply. I spent several weeks pulling old reels of tape. The whole track at one point was hanging off my wall in pieces of tape, about 300 to 400 little pieces of 1/4-inch tape which we then randomly grabbed and repieced together. That's why it keeps changing, mad frantic cuts. I sent everything to Grant and him, and Richard formed the Stakker Session album. Then they also licensed the Eurotechno soundtrack from MGM in USA. When it came to mastering and cutting the album, I met with Richard and Grant in South London. The result of this is a 23-track album including a run of 12 lo-fi acid tracks chopped and spliced in true Eurotechno style, plus the Snowman mix of Stakker, the first appearances of the studio version of Jetstream Tokyo and the full-length Crybaby, and 8 tracks of Brian's early Z-Box work. Not every track listed on the Stakker Sessions tracklist is present, although much of it is believed to be Eurotechno material, and there is indeed some crossover, with the 10th track on the soundtrack being cut from Positive Electron. The Z-Box material is less extensive still, but would all become part of the much larger Z-Box Sessions releases 4 years later. The music is remarkably experimental and forward-thinking, especially for its time. No surprise to anyone familiar with Eurotechno, but nevertheless worth pointing out. At a time when acid was still a comparatively new and simplistic style, Brian was putting everything into these pieces, which range from straightforward acid squelchers to industrial-sounding breakbeat moments, dubby minimalism, glitchy sample fests, analog techno and bouncy acid pop. No surprise that almost every review and comment about the album talked about how ahead of its time the material feels. The release also confirmed the origin of Z-Box from the ramblings of a madman 12-inch. There were brief plans to promote it with a Z-Box single, but nothing came of this. The cover design is pleasingly based on the original Global cover, showing a cube rather than a sphere. This is particularly fitting as it acts as an alternative to that heavily compromised album in the form of a collection of Brian's work at its purest and rawest. The album was a welcome burst of electronic music amidst all the early 2000s psychedelia, and has remained popular with fans ever since. With the end of Reflex in 2014, all rights reverted to Brian, and the album remained out of print until the launch of the FSOL Bandcamp in 2020, where it became available as a download release for the first time. Positive Electron. Opening with a brief burst of noise, Positive Electron quickly cuts into a dark acid line over a fairly mellow beat. The mellowness isn't reflected in the 303, however, which is tweaked to screech all over the shop. A secondary, more discordant synth sequence comes in sporadically, and either Boogie or Colin Scott announce the track's title numerous times. Nevertheless, it's a fairly simplistic piece, but straight to the point. In and out in less than 3 minutes, it's acid house in its purest and rawest form. A separate excerpt appears as the 10th track on the Eurotechno soundtrack. Negative Electron. Also known as Negative Electron Humanoid Mix. Coming straight after Positive Electron is its titular opposite. Although around the same tempo, the two tracks have little obvious in common with each other. Negative Electron is a much bassier track with punchier drums and a left-panned plate reverb that gives everything a weird sense of being in an industrial space. It's the closest the Humanoid material comes to sounding like dub, albeit much faster. A squelchy 303 line comes and goes throughout the piece, but it's the two deep growling bass lines that are the stars here. Near the end, the track breaks quickly for an unrelated acid line and a more staggered drum track. This is followed by the usual track joining burst of noise, before heading back into the piece for a couple more seconds, and the famous Berserk Humanoid sample as an abrupt end. It later appeared on both Your Body Robotic and Your Body Subatomic. Rotation. A quite tense sounding track with an off-kilter minor key 303 line, an oddly staggered drum track, and weird background synths and stabs that come through from time to time. Rotation moves away from the playfulness of Sessions as opening tracks into much darker territory. The piece seems to end around the halfway point with a burst of synthetic noise and several seconds of a much faster piece, only to return again for the second half. A few seconds of the otherwise unreleased Pull Me Over Baby are included in the closing chaos. Your Body Robotic. A track that gave title to Humanoid's 2007 remix album, Your Body Robotic is actually 3 pieces crammed into less than a minute. opening with a fast rhythm-heavy acid piece, linking glitches, taking it through to the very short moment with Boogie announcing K47 Technotronic, before the second half takes over in the form of a slower track with a distorted 303 and an oddly lo-fi, reverb-heavy breaks-ish drumline, a particularly chaotic piece on an already mixed-up album. Swamp Amp. Slowing things down a lot, Swamp Amp features a gurgling 303 line over chunky beats in a hip-hop early breakbeat style. Different electronic samples are thrown in over the track throughout, giving it a varying texture in spite of its otherwise largely static components. An electronic voice announces Stakker communication just before the beats loosen up briefly in the first half. Interlude whistle, also known as Zbox gas stove. Some metallic sounds and a brief indecipherable vocal snippet looped a couple of times, used as an interlude near the start of Zbox 1984-87 Volume 1. It also appears on Humanoid sessions under the name Interlude Whistle, and bizarrely not credited to Zbox. Delay Decay. Delay Decay leaves no room to get comfortable, with a really uncomfortable acid line and a marching beat that's never allowed to even approach anything resembling a groove. A very intense burst of weirdness that lasts less than a minute, probably for the best. Motion Static. Deep sub-bass, a hard-panned, snaky melody and subtle drum machines give Motion Static a more atmospheric feel than the majority of this Humanoid record, if not quite being ambient. The drums gradually become more complex as the track continues, and despite the melodic elements remaining quite static, it manages to both look back to Brian's Zbox material and forward to the IDM movement of the 90s at the same time. 303 squelches don't appear until the final 20 seconds, making it the least acidic Humanoid track on the album. EEPROM Contact. One of the 3 tracks on sessions to feature Stakker's Boogie and Colin Scott, including on vocals, EEPROM Contact is a fun, bouncy track with numerous squelchy 303 lines, playful bell-like synths and a very danceable beat. The repeated vocals make it feel closer to some of the more commercial dance music of the time, and in an alternate universe, it could well have ended up reworked into a Humanoid single. Hume Slipway. Not one to listen to on headphones, Hume Slipway, named after a road near Boogie's old squat in Manchester, is a very oddly phased track likely to make your head feel like it's turning inside out. A piece of fairly simplistic acid with a single, largely unmodulated 303 line and a straightforward drum beat with a brief gated breakdown in the middle. Pulsar. A particularly lo-fi piece of chunky acid, a minimal 303 line and plenty of metallic sounding synth hits alongside a simplistic beat, Pulsar sounds like it could be one of the earliest pieces from the sessions. Excellent, straightforward, raw acid. The final 15 seconds feature a much slower breakbeat style track that immediately goes into a fade out. Small Cluid. A playful FM synth sequence and occasional 303 bursts lead this odd track with quiet backing chords that come in from time to time and add a much darker feel to proceedings. Various reverbs and delays are added at different points in the piece, with a separate jarring synth sequence coming in at the end. Small Cluid closes the sequence of raw acid jams that makes up the bulk of sessions on a strange note, both jolly and unnerving, but relentlessly creative throughout. Jetstream Tokyo. The studio version of Jetstream Tokyo, a track originally planned for inclusion on Global, but only previously heard in its Peel session form, eventually released on Your Body Robotic. The studio mix is very similar to the Peel session, and with its Stakker-esque rhythms and relentless 303 line, it's a much more developed track than the bulk of the material on sessions. It was originally recorded alongside Stakker Humanoid in '87. It closes with a dark environment that would later find its way into the 1993 track The Teeth of the Wind. Running to a little more than half the runtime of the Peel version, one's own level of enjoyment of the track will decide which version is the best to listen to. Crybaby. It only took 14 years, but finally the full-length version of Crybaby received an official release on sessions 84 to 88. Recorded in '87 alongside Stakker and Jetstream Tokyo, and having been cut down to just over 3 minutes on Global, losing the entire acid climax in the process, and extended for the deep but still bafflingly faded early, the full version was really overdue at this point. The highlight of the track is the searing acid line in the final 2 minutes, all of which is on this version, making it by far the best mix to listen to. The fact that it wasn't even remotely tampered with by Westside should really be enough in its own right. Zbox, Piano in Kitchen. One of many Zbox tracks to be named after a daily aspect of Brian's life, Piano in Kitchen includes, no doubt, the very piano of its title. Panned hard left and playing otherworldly melodies, somewhere between dreamy and sinister, the piano is reflected in the hard right by either a synth playing similar, or itself under a huge number of filters. Whooshing synth sounds and lo-fi electronic percussion join the track, giving it some staggered momentum. By the end, the tension mounts with a more conventional drum machine and some stomping low notes on the piano. Conventional by Z-Box standards, but weird in any other context. The piece was recorded at Scarsdale Road in Manchester in '87. Laughing Box. More dark moods from Z-Box. Laughing Box features a steady lo-fi drum machine and arrhythmic metallic clanging throughout. Over this, dark notes are played, including a wonderful two-note synth melody full of foreboding and what sounds like improvised piano. Gradually, more sounds are added, including a weird, scratchy, voice-like noise and some subtle synth chords. The track was recorded at Brian's dad's home studio in 1986 and features contributions from The New Consciousness, a group of like-minded art experimentalists from Glasgow, of which Brian was part. The version on Humanoid Sessions is edited, with 4 minutes 14 to 5:28 of the full-length version removed and a heavily edited outro. The full-length mix, lasting over 6 minutes, appears on Z-Box Volume 1. Telephone Dial, also known as FX Dial. Due to it not really being a musical performance, there's no written by Z-Box credit for this track in the session's liner notes, meaning on Discogs it's amusingly listed as a Humanoid track. For a description, the credits do a more succinct and accurate job than I could. Recording of dial code in a public telephone box south side of Glasgow. Nanoplora. A fast lo-fi drum machine introduces this comparatively upbeat Z-Box track. Sinister guitar notes are fed through delay pedals, forming layers of fuzzy noise, while a growling synth note cuts through. The drum machine undergoes plenty of filters and delays itself, making the entire track feel like a constantly moving creature, always changing shape. Lo-fi grit meets detail and complexity. Recorded at Brian's dad's studio with help from members of the New Consciousness art collective. Well-meaning. Deep rumbling bass notes start this dense Z-Box track before being joined by the ever-present lo-fi drum machine and descending keyboard notes, as well as jazzy chords. More minimal than many of the more dense Z-Box tracks, well-meaning strength lies in the ever-changing drum track predating IDM by almost a decade. The piece was recorded by Brian at somewhere called Subatomic in Manchester in 1986. Land of Ash. What is that noise? Is it a voice? Probably. It could also be a saxophone or similar brass instrument. Maybe it's Alan Smith, whose house it was recorded at in Cambridge in '86. It's hard to tell under all the tape processing. It's weird and bloody unsettling though. Other noises happen around it and typically they're impossible to describe. A brief disturbing soundscape and a strange choice of the largely rhythm-forward Sessions 84 to 88 release. Z-Box Ear Out, also known as Far Out Son of Lung, Z-Box, also known as Humanoid, Z-Box TV Dinner Part 1. By far the most well-known Z-Box track, Ear Out found fame as the Far Out Son of Lung track's Z-Box on the smoking Japanese Babe 12-inch, and its oddly looping intro was used as the outro to the FSOL track The Far Out Son of Lung and the Ramblings of a Madman. It was also released as Z-Box TV Dinner Part 1 on the Humanoid release Sessions 84 to 88, before finally returning to its original name Ear Out for the Z-Box Volume 1 collection in 2007. Never let it be said that this band do things the simple way. As with many Z-Box tracks, it's pretty hard to convey the exact sounds present in words. The intro has a strangely mechanical feel, like a machine gradually slowing down until it fails. This intro is somewhat truncated on the Far Out Son of Lung and Humanoid releases, only fully present on the Z-Box record. The bulk of the track features typical Z-Box scuzzy drum machines with wailing feedback over the top. In the second half, a slowed down field recording adds a further layer of weirdness. Although stylistically different to the FSOL 1994 tracks on the 12-inch it came on, the typically Z-Boxy track fits tonally with the ISDN era incredibly well, with a similar surreal darkness to it. The version on the 12-inch includes the Bill Hicks sampling War on Drugs environment in its entirety at the end, accounting for its longer runtime. May 2nd, also known as 2nd of May. Tribal sounding percussion runs through this brief track, over which the usual Z-Box sound effects are present. What could be brass instruments and a flute, mangled and slowed down by tape, but could easily be field recording synths or who knows what else, growl away through delay pedals. one of the tracks recorded at Brian's dad's studio with the help from the New Consciousness in 1984. The Future Sound of London present Amorphous Androgynous, a psychedelic DJ experience, Stereoleto Festival, the 5th of July 2003. 18 months after his previous DJ show, Gaz returned to the stage with a new project. The Future Sound of London present Amorphous Androgynous, a psychedelic DJ experience. Okay, so there was still no escaping the FSOL tag, but this will be the first mix to be attributed to Amorphous, a big step for a group increasingly frustrated by the rest of the world's seeming lack of ability to accept the two projects are separate entities. Consisting of Gaz DJing psychedelic music, accompanied by Balaji Srivastav on sitar, tablet and dilruba, and Garry Lucas on guitar, it was considered the first step to a full live band. The show took place at the Stereoleto Festival in Russia's St. Petersburg, alongside further DJ sets by Martin Lever and James Holroyd. In terms of content, Gaz told the Moscow Times, "At the moment I play a lot of my own things and I modify and manipulate a lot of old recordings because right now I'm into a quite Eastern influenced live drum kind of cosmic rock and rare groove psychedelia. Cosmic rock and rare groove psychedelia definitely feels like a good definition of the material on the previous two Monstrous bubble mixes, which probably gives an idea of some of the stuff played. The only tracks known to be played were James Last's Here Comes the Sun, Pink Floyd's On the Run, and a then exclusive mix of The Lovers, quite possibly Love is the Lover mix, later released on The Otherness. Backing video was created by Brian and played throughout the whole 2-hour show. In the extensive interview with the Moscow Times to promote the show, Gaz mentioned the band were working on 2 new albums, one by Amorphous and one by FSOL. Amorphous Androgynous was going to be my live kind of big psychedelic band, and the Future Sound of London will continue doing what it does, which is a warped, organic kind of sampling. This was echoed in the press release for the festival itself, which mentioned the FSOL album, the first new material under that name for 7 years, would be out at the start of 2004. This was obviously a very exciting moment for fans awaiting the follow-up to Dead Cities. Needless to say, it didn't happen, and there's no record of any FSOL material from this era even existing. 2 members of the FSOL list were present for the show and allowed their reviews to be used on my Welcome to the Galaxy Pharmaceutical website. I'm reprinting them here with good faith that, as this is partially an extension of the project that began with that site, their words are okay to be used. Please do get in touch if this is no longer the case. Review by Alex Canavin. They played a mind-blowing remix of The Lovers, apparently new material, and also the closing track was totally hilarious. No old FSOL tracks though. Gaz was probably somewhat embarrassed by the rockstar-like reception the rather large audience gave to his bizarre experiment. Hopefully it encourages him to transform AA into a real band, which he said he intends to do. Oh, and he was very accessible after the gig, so I got my ticket signed. If we're lucky, we may get the mixing desk bootleg. That never happened. Review by Streamline. This Stereoleto festival is part of a project which consists of 7 Saturday parties from 28th of June till 9th of August. Various interesting artists perform there, and among them was Gaz. The festival is held in a nice garden which is situated in downtown, 1,000 metres from my home. A cheesy and exotic smell in the area, candles, bar, great light decorations. The best Russian beer, Tinkoff, from the private brewery is everywhere. There's a square behind the park where Amorphous was supposed to perform, and the indoor dance floor to the right where some kind of fashion show took place. Didn't see this. And DJs Martin Lever and James Holroyd played. The weather was warm and awesome. The doors opened at 11. People were walking across the park, drinking beers and so on. The outdoor main stage was not so huge. It was like near the castle in Lulworth 2 years ago, but with a white drop screen for video purposes. AA was supposed to start at 1, but actually Gaz and his mates went on stage a little later, 1:20. Me and my friend were not along with the rest of the public, but in the pit straight in front of the stage, 1 metre from the sitar player and 4 metres from Gaz. We were drinking beers, smoking pipes with Irish Oak Peterson tobacco and enjoying the real thing happening on stage. Gaz looked at me and smiled a few times during the show. It was nice. The show set was about 140 to 150 minutes long. Ooh, more than 2 hours of Amorphous Androgynous. The set began with songs which reminded me of the track The Isness on the AA album. The Lovers was very cool and long. All songs were mixed very well. You played CDR type discs and accompanied with guitar and sitar, drums, one more exotic instrument which I can't name really. The last 3 were done by the blind Srivastav and guitar by Garry Lucas. The instruments sounded great mixed with Kobe's set. It was cool to hear the I'm Here samples and Dead Can Dance vocal samples during the set, and the track with singing Little Darling, Here Comes the Sun, I Say It's Alright, or something like this. Heard a few times during FSOL transmissions 2000 to 2001. I suppose many people know this track. Gaz sang along with the track vocals. Then, near the end, Gaz introduced his friends and said some words about the music they're playing. Gaz filled the psychedelic ambient set with more funky tracks as well. As for video background, the well-mixed video was performed, some footage taken from Cascade, Lifeforms and We Have Explosive videos, but most of the 150-minute film was exclusive, of really FSOL psychedelic type visuals. Later Gaz said to me that Brian was working on that video background in the studio for the event, but I can't be 100% sure it was all a genuine FSOL video footage. As for registration of the gig, many photographers were making photos of them performing, so I suppose they should be soon either in press or internet. My Digicam's battery pack went to 0 and I only own 3 shots from the show itself, stage, Gaz mixing, Srivastav, but I suppose in the very near future I'll have some proper photos as well. A very few people were videotaping the show. I don't think they have the entire thing, and I suppose the quality of audiovisual sucks on their tapes or whatever, but no pro cams. Only one TV channel, 6, were taking some shots from the gig, 10 minutes, and after they talked with Gaz for about 5 to 7 minutes on various topics. In the end he added, Garry, Cobain, Amorphous, Androgynous, future's here. In 2 weeks there will be a short report on TV channel 6, and I hope maybe someone will be able to bring a soundboard registration of the show. Not sure at all. I've also got a huge promo poster of the event with Gaz on it. Straight after they finished playing, Gaz and his 2 mates went backstage, outdoors, right direction, and Gaz was signing autographs. I chatted with Gary Lucas, the guitarist. He was really kind, as well as others. Gaz was joking a lot and said he remembered my face when we were enjoying the gig. Very friendly person and talkative. Later we chatted about 10 minutes or so. He's still interested in medicine and asked about a few places in Russia. He doesn't care much about the money, music industry and stuff like that. Some things he told me. Brian is waiting for a baby now and is very busy with it also. We will perform in Moscow next year, or autumn 2003, for sure, with a much bigger show, or something like this. I've read the press a few words about it. It's good that it's not just a rumour now. We'll have a new album next month. I said, what? Maybe it will be a Divinity EP. And he said, yes of course, Divinity, 40 minutes of mixes. I asked about the promo video for the single and he said, yeah. I asked whether the 12-hour Kiss transmission, he replied, when was it? 95. The time we really did live for Kiss, or something like that. Really? We did a 12-hour one? Yes, he did. Really? We did it? He replied with sarcasm. So Gaz is careless about these things and liked to joke on it, as we saw on Justin's video from Big Chill 2001. Real name, Gaz Cobain. I removed 2 letters from it. One guy gave him a Russian bootleg copy of Amorphous Androgynous Tales album to sign it. Gaz said, is it a bootleg? Yeah, it is. Arrest this man, he added. He was interested and excited to see it. Going to the club or what? He replied, nope, to bed. Chatting with Gaz was really interesting and nice. I've got my translations signed 3 times, a couple of autographs on the tickets to my friend, and the message with the autograph for the mailing list on Stereoleto flyer. Also the autograph of Gary Lucas along with the huge promo poster of the event with Gaz on it. After the show we had a short break with beers and tobacco on the fresh air. During the rest of the night we had lots of fun funking along with DJs Martin Lever and James Holroyd indoors. Hard house and awesome techno stuff going on there, it was cool. I enjoyed the time. Thanks Gaz and all. The photos you've seen on screen during this are the few that made it through the Wayback Machine, taken by both reviewers with many thanks. And that's your lot for this week, and indeed the whole of 2003, generally a very quiet year. I'll be back this time next week with the 2004 video, and that's another year that will be summed up in a single video, but with a lot more going on. Until then, do let me know what you think of this video, what you think of the Humanoid and Stakker reissues, as well as some of the Amorphous mixes. There are comments down below, please do leave me a comment, I love reading them. Also like, subscribe, share if you feel like it, all interaction really helps my video. I really appreciate everybody's support, and I just love chatting to you in the comments. And I hope you'll join me next week for some more Amorphous Androgynous.